I buried my brother on a Thursday. By Saturday evening, I understood exactly what kind of man I had married. This is the part I never told anyone, until now. My husband asked me to sign a separation agreement at my brother's funeral reception, and I signed it the same evening. My name is Mia, I am 29 years old, a middle school art teacher in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I was standing in the kitchen of the house Daniel and Cassandra had shared when my husband, Ryan, pulled me away from the condolence line and told me he had feelings for my sister-in-law, Cassandra. I need you to be practical about this, he said. You know our marriage hasn't been working. Cassandra and I, it just happened. I need you to sign the separation agreement today. You take your things, I take mine, no lawyers, no dragging it out, just let us move forward. The word practical. 3 days after I buried my brother, I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, give me the papers. He looked surprised, he shouldn't have been. Ryan had always had a specific relationship with my older brother, Daniel, the kind where he laughed at Daniel's jokes a little too loudly and borrowed money twice, and had a different excuse each time about when he'd pay it back. Daniel never pushed, that was Daniel, he'd rather absorb a loss than create a scene. I watched Ryan borrow $2,000 the first time and $3,500 the second, watched him clap Daniel on the shoulder and say you're the best, man, with the ease of someone who had never once worried about being the best himself. Ryan managed logistics for a company someone else built. Daniel had built his own. I don't think Ryan ever forgave him for that, he was too smooth to say it directly. But I noticed the way he talked about Daniel's company at dinner, always with a slight pause before his business, like the words cost him something. I signed the separation agreement that evening because I had already understood something Ryan hadn't figured out yet, not because I was defeated, not because I didn't know my own worth. I signed because in the 30 seconds between Ryan asking and me answering, I did the math he hadn't done. He thought he was getting Daniel's life, the house, the company, the status, everything Daniel had spent 12 years building. He thought Cassandra came with all of it. He thought this was the move. The agreement he handed me was a property waiver. I would make no claim on anything he considered his, and he would make no claim on anything I considered mine. He'd written it to protect his anticipated share of Daniel's world. I signed it because I knew what that world actually looked like from the inside. He assumed without asking. I knew without telling. I signed. I folded the papers. I put them in my bag and went back to accept condolences alone. 8 months before the funeral, something shifted in our apartment and I couldn't name it at first. Ryan started coming home later. He checked his phone differently, face down on the table instead of left on the counter, a small change that meant everything once I noticed it. I told myself it was work stress. I told myself we were both tired. I told myself the particular kind of silence that had moved into our marriage was something that happened to everyone eventually and would pass if I gave it enough room. I was wrong about all of it, but I wasn't ready to be right yet. The thing about grieving something you can't prove is dying is that you keep trying to save it, because admitting you already know the ending feels like giving up too soon. My hands went cold the night I finally admitted to myself that I was already grieving. That was 3 months before the funeral. 6 weeks before he died, Daniel called me on a Sunday evening and asked if I had an hour. We talked for 2. He told me the company was in trouble, not catastrophic, not unfixable, but real. A warehouse lease coming due that he wasn't sure he could renew at the new rate. 2 major contracts that hadn't been renewed, clients who'd consolidated with larger firms. Debt he'd taken on during expansion that was sitting heavier than he'd expected. He was restructuring, trying to figure out the right path, and he didn't want to worry Cassandra until he had a clearer picture. He asked me not to say anything yet. He wanted to tell her himself when he knew more. You're the one I trust with the real version, he said. I didn't know, sitting on my couch listening to my brother work through his numbers, that it would be one of the last real conversations we'd ever have. If someone ever trusted you with the version nobody else got, stay with me. After I signed the papers, I kept coming back to one thing Ryan never asked. Not once in 4 years of being part of this family did he sit down with Daniel and ask how the business was actually doing. He came to the cookouts. He accepted the birthday dinners. He borrowed the money. He watched Daniel talk about the company at Thanksgiving and he nodded along and he formed a picture in his head of what it all added up to, and he never once verified it. I thought about that picture he'd built, the house, the company name on the side of trucks, the way Daniel could pick up a check without looking at it. Ryan had watched all of those surface details and constructed a life he wanted to step into. He was so certain he understood what he was getting that it never occurred to him to check. That certainty was the whole plan, and the whole plan was built on something he'd never actually looked at directly. 3 months after we began our separation, I heard through my parents that the warehouse lease had come due. The rate had increased significantly and the landlord wasn't negotiating. The 2 contracts Daniel had been worried about had not been renewed. The clients had moved to larger regional operators, which Daniel had seen coming and had been trying to replace. The debt from the expansion was still there, now without the revenue stream Daniel had planned to use to service it. Ryan had moved into Daniel's house with Cassandra 6 weeks after the funeral, assuming that whatever Daniel had left behind would naturally pass to Cassandra, and through her to him. What he stepped into was a restructuring situation that required the kind of patient, detailed work Daniel had been doing quietly for years, work Ryan had no experience with and no patience for. He didn't inherit Daniel's life, he inherited Daniel's unfinished problem, and unlike Daniel, he had no idea how to finish it. In those first weeks after the funeral, before our legal separation was even finalized, my mother found a birthday card in a drawer at their house. Daniel had brought it over the last time he visited, left it there by accident or maybe on purpose, it was hard to know with him. It was addressed to me, my birthday was 3 weeks away, he had bought it early which was exactly like him, organized, always ahead, never last minute. I sat in my old childhood bedroom and opened it alone. His handwriting, which I will know for the rest of my life, "You were always the one who actually paid attention. Don't let anyone make you feel small for that." I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough that the light changed in the room. He had written it weeks before he died, in an ordinary moment, not knowing it would be the last thing he ever said to me. That was Daniel, he said the important things before he knew they were important. Ryan called me 4 months after we parted. I was in my classroom after school, cleaning up the oil pastels my students had used that afternoon, and my phone lit up with his name. I looked at it for the full duration of 2 rings. I thought about what he might say, whether he'd figured it out by then, whether the call was an apology or an ask or something in between. I put the phone face down on my desk and kept cleaning up the pastels. He didn't leave a voicemail. I didn't call back, there was nothing he could have said that I needed to hear, and nothing I needed to say that would have made any difference to either of us. Some conversations only matter if both people are still inside the story. I had already left. I straightened the tins on the shelf, the ones Daniel had given me when I got this job, and turned off the lights and went home. It's been 1 year, I still teach at the same school in Raleigh. I pay my own rent, which I hadn't done alone in 4 years, and it feels different than I expected, quieter, steadier, more like myself. Ryan and Cassandra are still together as far as I know, still working through whatever Daniel's company became without Daniel. I don't follow it closely. I started a new sketchbook last month, the first page blank, which used to feel like pressure and now feels like something else entirely. Daniel's card is in a frame on my nightstand. If this story stayed with you like this video, subscribe so you never miss one and tell me in the comments, do you think Mia should have warned Ryan about the business or was staying silent the right call? Some people leave you for what they think you don't have. They never stop to ask what you actually understood. My husband signed his own fate the day he handed me those papers. He just didn't know it yet.